Before we get started in telling my story, I just want to give a brief history of residential schools to the general public. You know, and a lot of people don't know what took place and how they came about. So I'll read what I wrote down here a few months back. Indian residential schools. The schooling of native children first came under colonial control in 1867 with the British North America Act, which created Canada. After Confederation making of Canada, legislative responsibility for First Nations people is transferred to Ottawa, capital city of Canada. Thus, the Indian Act of 1884 began the process of developing education policies for First Nations people. The Government of Canada maintains control through policies and funding. The Indian Act was comprised of the following policies. 1. Assimilation, to absorb into dominant society or culture, to make and become similar. 2. Segregation, to cut off from dominant society or culture or to isolate. 3. Integration, to incorporate or bring into dominant society or cultures. And assimilation, 1870 to 1910. Missionaries and the government to assimilate First Nations people into the lower fringes of society, of mainstream society. Accomplishing this goal was through the children. Department of Indian Affairs, through the Indian Act, in order for Native children to be assimilated into white society, they have to be removed from their way of life of their people. (1884), John A. Macdonald, Prime Minister of Canada, in the House of Commons. I think we must, by slow degrees, educate generation after generation until the nature of the animal almost is changed by the nature of the surroundings. 1910 to 1950, change in policy of integrating First Nations children into mainstream public schools became the responsibility of the provinces, rather than the churches. Per capita grants were still given out by the federal government. The result of this change, thousands of First Nations children were now forced into the public school. 1879, Davin Commission visits several residential schools in the United States. And in the States they were called boarding schools that are already in operation. 1913, 1932, Duncan Campbell Scott, Deputy Superintendent General of Indian Affairs. Our objective is to continue until there is not one single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and there is no Indian question and no Indian department. 1879, if anything is to be done with the Indian, we must catch him very young. The children must be kept constantly within the circle of civilized conditions. 1895, enforced English-only policy. So as long as he keeps his native tongue, so long will he remain a community apart. If it were possible to gather in all the Indian children and retain them for a certain period of time, there would be produced a generation of English-speaking only Indians, accustomed to the ways of civilized life, and the Indian problem would be solved. And this is when people started getting the right to vote in Canada. 1928, women got the right to vote. 1948, Asian people get the right to vote. 1960, First Nations people finally get the right to vote. In 1920, the law regarding compulsory attendance was strengthened, meaning that all Native children between the ages of 7 to 15 must, by law, attend an Indian residential school. This meant that children could and were forcibly removed from their families and their communities by the priests, Indian agents, police officers, and in some cases our own people who were hired by the Indian agents across Canada. From mid-1800s until the 1980s, First Nations children had to attend Indian residential schools. The Canadian government funded 88 Indian residential schools across Canada. These schools were administered by the following Christian denominations: Roman Catholic, 50 schools; Anglican, 20 schools; Presbyterian United Church, 12 schools. I'm almost done here. In 1880, there were 11 Indian residential schools in operation. 1909, 88 Indian residential schools in operation. 1960, 60 schools remain in operation. So that's a brief history of the nature of the Indian residential schools where we're forced to attend. I just want to let the general public know that I personally don't blame the general public, because most of them did not know what was exactly going around these schools across Canada. It was the church and the government of Canada that I blame for their genocidal actions. And I started writing my story back in 2010. My brother Wayne, Iris, Wendell, my cousin Wendell, and they started working on this program, Healing Begins. But I didn't participate because I was working on construction and away most of the time. So they're the ones that was working on the Indian residential school program. And I'll start telling my story. I probably won't go through everything, but I'll go through the important parts. June 16, 2010. Vaughan Nicholas's experience at Shubenacadie Indian Residential School. First, let me give a brief history of myself. I was born at the Tobique Reserve, April 15, 1947. I was the second oldest of 5 children of Louis and Veronica Bonnie DeVoe. I have a little memory of my real early childhood. I do remember the loss of my sister Mona and my brother Roger, who died of spinal meningitis in the early 1950s, a month apart. I remember going to school in Tobique for grade 1. The language used at home was Malseet. And my home life was a happy life. I don't recall any bad incidents at home. And there was lots of laughter, you know what I mean? We were poor, you know what I mean? But there was lots of love and laughter. I don't remember getting spanked till I attended the Indian Day School. Okay, there was 3 of us. There was 3 of us left at home. Wayne, the oldest, me, the second oldest, and Iris, the youngest. My mom had to go to a sanatorium in St. Basil. My dad was working at Lawrence Air Force Base in Limestone, Maine. Around this time period, I remember being taken care of by my grandmother, Mom. We as kids must have been too much to handle for her, as she was an elderly person. Then I remember being taken care of by my Uncle Pete and Aunt Jeanette for a while. They also had a big family and had a hard time taking care of another 3 kids to look after. Then we went to stay with our Aunt Gookum, who was widowed with her 4 children, and which eventually was too much for her. Yeah, and I found it quite difficult adjusting to the Indian Day School with the nuns in Tobique. All this time, from I was told later that year, my dad was drinking a lot and not taking care of us properly. I guess the year 1955, there were complaints about his drinking. It was then the authorities, the government and the chief and council and the Indian agent decided that he was unable to take care of us, and they gave orders to have us sent to Shubenacadie Indian Residential School. Well, we did not know that we were going to be sent away. I remember my dad and Uncle Tony driving us to Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. We thought we were going on a trip, a very long one at that. It took forever to get there. We got there in the pitch of darkness at night. We all walked up the stairs of this massive building. We were met by the priest and a nun. I started getting scared. My sister Iris was already clinging to my father, not wanting to go with the nun. The hallways were empty. I heard the door open there and another nun walking towards us. The sound of her footsteps echoing in the big empty hall was really frightening and scary. More so for my sister, Iris. My dad was talking to the priest and nun. Meanwhile, we were being taken away. Before that, taken away, he had come to see us, said goodbye, and then we had to stay. And we were being taken away, Iris to the girls' side, and Wayne and I to the boys' side. We all started crying, and we were, as we were taken away and seeing our dad walking away from us and going out the building. We no longer were just crying. We were screaming for our dad not to leave us. Iris at this time was hysterical, trying to get away from the nun and to get to our dad. I'll never forget her screams that night, that we saw our dad leaving the building. So Iris was taken to the girls' side, and Wayne and I were taken to the boys' side. We were not separated very long. The nun came to get Wayne and I to try to calm her down, but there was no way she would calm down. So we ended up sleeping in the big dormitory that night. Iris eventually cried herself to sleep, in the early hours of the morning. We also fell asleep and got woken up by a girl who was also Maliseet, but we did not know that at the time. When Iris saw her, she started crying and screaming because of her face. She was scabby all over. A nun showed up and took Wayne and I back to the boys' side. And that was the last contact we had for a while, seeing Iris. I would see her in the chapel, in the eating area. I would try to make contact with her by trying to talk to her and by waving to her, eh? We were all going for our breakfast. We were on the boys' side. Iris was coming out the girls' side. I seen her just, "Hi, how you doing?" Bang, right across the face. Here, "You're not supposed to talk to those girls. You get back there," and stuff like that, eh? And here's my sister, you know. We just got to recently got to Shubenacadie, and you know, we had a happy life, fun life in Tobique. But when we got to Shubenacadie, you know, I couldn't even say hi or talk to her. And then Wayne and I started getting processed. Shubenacadie haircuts, eh? Look like they had a bowl on our head and then cut it all the way across there, stuff like that, eh? And they cut all the way around. And then we got disinfected, you know, holy crimps. We got in the shower there, and then they put all this stuff on us, eh? Holy Christ, I was burned, crying, we were crying, you know, stuff like that, eh? Because that stuff burnt. As I said earlier, our first language was Maliseet, and we were definitely not fluent in English. We did have grade 1 in Tobique, and we started to learn English. Wayne and I would speak Maliseet only to be heard by the nun, and we got strapped and for speaking our language. You know, and when they strapped us, you know, they were no light straps. They were beatings, you know. They swung as hard as they could, you know, to make us kids cry, eh? And this only happened to young kids, you know what I mean? The first ones when they get there. I think in about 3 years, you know, anybody said something or was out of the way, bang, you got it, you know, and not just one time, eh? You know, I'm calling this, but you know, that went on through the years, you know, for the first 3 years. Yeah. So anyway, I remember Wayne having gotten sick and could not make the toilet, eh? The nun was yelling at Wayne for messing his pants and making him cry. I said to the nun, "His the best, not knowing how to say diarrhea in English. Then she starts yelling at me, "What are you saying?" And then starts slapping me, stuff like that, and hitting me, and told me not to speak Indian, you know. And we said, as young and newer boys, Wayne and I were put into a big dormitory, 45 beds on the top floor, 4th floor. One night, as we were going to bed, changed into our nightgowns, said our prayers, lights went out. The nun leaves. The door closes by the stairs. All is quiet for about 10 minutes. Then I heard 2 boys talking for a few minutes. All of us talking for a few minutes. All of a sudden the lights come on. Here comes the nun rushing towards the boys, you know, that were talking. She must have zoned in on the right ones. She told them to lay across their beds, lift their nightgowns, and started hitting them as hard as they could on their bare asses. The screams and the hollowings from both them I'll never forget. Bang, 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 10 times each, and she wouldn't let up, you know. and these kids, holy jeez, they're, well, when I heard that, that scared the hell out of me. I did not want any part of that. After that incident, I tried to stay out of trouble, which was impossible to do. As many as 70 to 80 boys were there through the year. You got picked on, shoved, beaten up on. Yeah. Another incident I had with a nun was when I was in grade 2. Well, the first year I was there, 1955. I believe there was 3 or 4 of us standing, talking by the door of the classroom. Somebody said something. The nun was at her desk already when I said, "Holy cow." And I could hear the chair move, and I saw her coming, walking briskly towards me. I thought nothing of it, till she got to me and slapped me right across the face, quite hard. And I said to her, all I said was, "Holy cow," and then came another slap, even harder, this time making me cry. She said, "Cows are sacred in certain parts of this world. It's like taking the Lord's name in vain." How does an 8-year-old from Tobique First Nation reservation know about cows being sacred? This was another example of the nuns' excessive force to us little Indian children. The church and its people, the priest, brothers, nuns, to the general public are portrayed as loving, caring, and helping the people in need or in desperate situations. In the case of Indian residential schools, they were working for the government of Canada, and they did their jobs well. And that was to take away our language and culture. The first year was the toughest, being away from home. We did find out we had cousins at Shubenacadie already there. Clayton and Alan Solis, they were brothers. I didn't know how long they were there. It must have been for quite a while because they could not speak their language. And in Shubenacadie, older boys took care of the younger boys, And it was Clayton and Alan who took care of Wayne and myself. And Clayton was quite proficient at knitting. He would knit mittens, socks, and bunalos, scarves, and he did that, for Wayne and I and stuff like that. And we were assigned numbers when we got there. I was number 41. That number was sewn on our clothing and stamped on our shoes. We had different sets of clothes, school clothes, yard clothes, Sunday clothes for special occasions, Easter, Christmas, Holy Communion, confirmation, and new clothes when we were sent home for the summer. First time we got to go home, our dad came to pick us up. Clayton and Alan came with us back to Tobique. And we're all pretty excited about leaving Shubenacadie and going back to our community. Our welcome was somewhat weird. Our cousins, aunts, uncles was glad to see us. Everybody was speaking to us in this strange language, Malseet, which we could not understand after being in Shubenacadie for about 10 months. The kids in the community would speak to us in Malseet and make fun of us because we could not understand. At first, they would not play with us because we were from Shubenacadie. Over the years, I learned that they were threatened, that if they didn't behave, they would be sent to Shubie also. Yeah, so the first couple weeks was tough because we were from Shubie. I couldn't recall how many fights I got into, but it was quite a few. It didn't take long to start getting our language back somewhat, but not fluently. I remember going to my Aunt Gulkum's house. I said to Gulkum, Kadoop, Kegoin Midjan, which I'm hungry, what do you have to eat? Is what I said to her in Maliseet. She looked up at me, a surprised look. She made a face and said to me, I don't understand. In a few seconds, she smiled. She smiled at me and made me a peanut butter sandwich. Anyway, in no time, summer had passed, and we started hearing about having to go back to Shubie in September. Although I did not want to go back, I had to go along with my brother Wayne and Iris, go back. This time around, our dad did not take us. We started going to Shubie by train, from Plashock, New Brunswick, to Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. We would try to hide from anyone so that we didn't get on that train. And so the first couple of years, the boys were looked after by the nuns. I remember lining up to a shower, to take a shower. Soon after we went in, to take a shower, there's about 10 showers there in the shower room, It's wide open. And soon after we went in to take showers, in strolls one of the nuns, taking a look around and walking to the end of the wall there, looking at us boys, turns around and still looking at us, and she was definitely not in a hurry. After the showers, we were checked. They would pull our ears, lift our arms up. Here's the article that they had about the Indian residential schools. Clean behind the ears. And that's what the nun was doing to me. He come out with a towel over me, and then she checking the boys ahead of me and stuff like that. And when he got to me, started pulling my ears like this, like that, and then lift my arms and so anyway, she told me to bend over, spread my cheeks. Then when I bend over, spread my cheeks, bang, I got a slap. Go back in that shower and clean your missed spots. When your bum is wet and stuff like that, and the sting of that strap, still being a little boy, it always makes me cry and make other boys cry. I really think they really enjoyed punishing us little children, for any reasons that they could find, Second year is coming to an end in Shubie. Everybody's getting excited. The countdown has begun for Freedom Day. It's finally here, Freedom Day. Everybody is feeling happy, laughing, and like I said, there was usually 70 to 80 boys, maybe same number of girls. We did not leave at the same time, eh? A bunch would leave each day, you know, and maybe 30 at a time, you know. It'll go on the first train, there's a second train, and that happened every day, eh? Boys and girls heading to the train station. Yeah. We lucked out. An older girl, last name Bernard, from St. Basil Reserve, was going our way. She looked after us during our trip home. We arrived in Plastrock late at night and was picked up by our dad. As years went by, it got a little easier. We had to go back in September. We had some company with us heading back to Shubenacadie that September. It was the Bear Kids, Dwight, Tony, their sister Annette. And boy, were there a handful. Busy, mischievous little kids. Climbing everywhere. Anyway, we had to change trains in Moncton, New Brunswick. We must have waited at least an hour or two, maybe sometimes 3 hours, stopover to change our train. Dwight Bear put some money, I think quarter, in his photo machine, right? Had his picture taken. Only part of his head was shown, eh? Up to here. He had a shaved head, big ears, wide open eyes. A very funny photo. Anyway, we were all laughing, eh? And he was showing it around to everyone. Look at my picture, look at my picture, you know. Of course, they spoke fluent Malseet, the kids, Bear Kids, you know. And anyway, he showed it to these 3 young men, probably going to university or trade school or somewhere. They were older than us, and they were making fun of him and my sister. My sister's hair, Iris' hair was in Indian braids. One of them started pulling out her braids like this, eh? And giving the woo, 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 Indian hoots, you know, and she told them to leave her alone. Then one of them again grabbed her braids. I got up because I was sitting in a different area. I got up and told that feller, "Don't you ever touch my sister's hair again. If you do, I'll fucking smack you." Just then the other guy started to say something, started to get up. I pointed to him right there. I told him to sit the F down and shut the hell up. And I'm talking to this fellow, that fellow that pulled my sister's hair. You know, nobody did anything as I walked away, but I was really scared, eh? They were going to do something. They started teasing us about being Indian, you know, still giving us the hoots and stuff like that, eh? And I finally went to a man in uniform and told him that those guys are teasing and bothering us. He looked over at them and started walking towards them. They all got up and left, and we caught our train and were on our way to Shubenacadie. Anyway, I want to try to make this. Yes, then we'd go back next year on our way back home, and we had the Bear Kids to look after. It was the Moncton and me again, and waiting for that transfer train. I know someone in the lineup for tickets. I said to Iris and Wayne, I said, "Hey, that looks like our cousin Vaughan Nicholas." She didn't see us. So we went over and pulled at her arm, eh? And I said, "Hi." She looked surprised to see me, and we were all very glad that we had somebody older to look after us. Our cousin cousin Glenna was a very shy person. We started sitting together, and on the train on our way to Plastrock, and then wherever she went, there was the 6 of us following her, just like the geese, goslings following the mother, mother goose there, 'cause it was funny. Anyway, when we were all in a train, the barricades told Glenna they learned a new song while in Shubenacadie that year. The 3 of them got up and then started singing "O Canada" as loud as they could. Glenna was telling them, "Just duck stick, not webble stick," in a low voice. Told them to shut up and go sit down over there. But anyway, as she was really embarrassed, and the boys the barricades just kept on going until they finished the song "O Canada," drawing a lot of attention, and everything was. When their song was done, there was loud claps all over the car. There, other people that were there, clapping for the kids. Glenna was really embarrassed. Anyway. Not all our homecomings were happy ones. One time we came home and our dad was drinking, and he had his drinking buddies sleeping in our supposedly clean beds, but they weren't clean. Our Aunt Gookin came over and told our dad to kick out everyone, out of the house. And I believe that night we spent the night with Gookin. And during our summer stays, we would visit our mother at the St. Basil Sanatorium. She had tuberculosis. I believe this was the 3rd year we got back to Shubenacadie. I think it was the year that I was in grade 4.
I only have 3 minutes left on this card, so I think I might.
Okay, I'm going to skip some spots there.
Okay, but I can run to grab another one, so
Yeah.
I'll just let you know when I'm.
Oh yeah.
When I'm out.
Yeah. Well, that year we started to work in the potato fields, picking potatoes. Our mom, after potato picking, our mom came home for Christmas from the hospital till after New Year's. That was one of the better Christmas I can remember. Lots of toys, sleds. And what sticks to me is that my mom did not want to go back to the hospital, but they forced her. I remember, and the RCMP were there, my other aunts were telling her to go, and she didn't want to. And I remember her saying, the next time I come home, it's going to be in a box. True to the fact, it was either June or July. My Aunt Gookum got a call. She had to go across the street to Herman Solis's, He was the only but a few on the reserve that had a telephone. After she came back from Herman's, she was telling somebody, "We got to get a hold of Louis. Louis is my dad. Somebody has died, At that time, I did not know it was my mom. I was either 10 years old, maybe 11. Yeah, that's something I'll never forget. But anyway, after that summer, we had to go back to Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. By this time, we were getting older and getting used to leaving and for a year and then coming back. I started in 2010, and then as writing the first part of my story, for some reason, the tears was just coming off, and then after I got to this point, I had to take a break, It was getting too tough for me, And here it is, September 14, 2011. 15 months later, I started writing my story again, And on September 8, 2011, I told part of my story publicly to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Annette Bear-Jacques from Tobique was the first one to speak. Her story already had me choking up and feeling her pain. I knew Annette as a quiet person over the years, but on September 8, 2011, she showed her courage when she was telling her story to the TRC. I was really quite proud of her for her strength and her courage. It was not an easy thing to do for her, but she did. Good for her. Then it was my turn to tell my story. I thought I could do it without breaking down, but I just couldn't. I started crying and tell my story. I had to read what I wrote 15 months earlier. Anyway, when my name was called to go up front, I let out a yell. Hey! Skijin nil! Negot kok leo! There we go, Blockman, negot kok! Balita hamsel is skijinowi! Anyway, in English, I yelled out in Maltese language, I am Indian. I am from Negutkuk. They call me Blockman in Negutkuk. I am very proud to be an Indian. After I finished telling my story, I told the ERC what happened to us Indian children was a form of genocide, that Canada will never be a great country unless it comes to terms with all Indians in Canada. We are treated as third-class citizens in our own country. You only recognize two peoples in Canada. You got the Anglophones and the French. And the Aboriginal people of this country are not included as part of this country, when we're not included as equals. I blame the Church and the Government of Canada for what happened to us Indian children, for trying to make us assimilate to their society, the methods they used to achieve this. The punishment they call spanking was not spanking as you would give a child. They were actually beatings because we were Indian and we spoke our language, Maliseet, Micmac. It's very hard to forgive and even harder to reconcile with the Church and the Government of Canada. And I said before, I do not blame the general public, only the Government of Canada and the Church for doing what they did to us. And again, a little later on, this is October 13, 2011. I have a very different view of the Church today than I did when I was growing up. In Shubenacadie, when the nuns woke us up, we knelt and prayed, said prayers. We got ready for morning mass. We said prayers in the lineup. And then we said prayers in the refectory for breakfast, dinner, and supper. We said grace before and after meals. Then we said prayers before class, after class. Then we had to go to benediction in the evenings during Lent. Prayers before. We went to bed every night, 7 days a week. Nuns would walk around, and if they didn't hear you praying, they would smack you. So you had to pray. After 6 years I spent at Shubi, I have said enough prayers to last a lifetime. I am saved. We did have playtime at Shubi. We played marbles. Nuns would gather the boys and started throwing marbles. It was called scramble. And we would be chasing and trying to get as many marbles as we could. But the little kids would get very few marbles because the bigger boys were faster and quicker and stronger. We'd get pushed and knocked down, making us smaller boys cry because we hardly got any marbles. We also played cricket and played softball. Also went swimming in the spring and a little bit after we got back in the early fall. And we would skate at the pond during the winter and at the lake. There was a little pond there by the barns. We also would slide with toboggan and big double runner sleds. Once in a while we get to watch a movie, mostly religious movies. I remember writing to my dad, telling him that I had heard God's voice. I think it was the 10 Commandments. I wrote him what I heard. The food at Shubie was something not to be desired. It was hardly edible, but we had to eat what was given to us. I had seen some kids vomiting, and even my brother Wayne couldn't eat and stand, and he ended up vomiting, because they were forced to eat, and they get a beating, and they were forced to eat their own vomit and food. They wouldn't let them leave until they finished eating. After classes, we were quite hungry. They would give us leftover bread with molasses or butter, with peanut butter, one slice for each boy. The only time I remember any good food was at Christmas and Easter. During the 6 years I stayed at Shubie, I witnessed quite a bit of abuse by the nuns and by the young men, Carl and Jerry. They hired, like I said, the nuns, first 3 years were looked after. The boys, I was there, nuns looked after the boys. But the last 3 years, they got brothers to come over and look after the boys. And they hired 2 young fellas, in their late teens or early 20s, Carl and Jerry. These abuses by the nuns were included pinching your cheeks, and then ear pulling, I remember being pulled by the ear and then stumbling along to keep up with her and stuff like that, and they'd beatings with ladles, big spoons. There was this big nun that worked in the kitchen. Always had a metal ladle there, and when she seen a boy or witnessed something that wasn't right with her, and right over knuckles, bang, bang, and then I tell you, these screams, with these little kids, because we're all little kids, You had spoons and hardwood pointers, straps, and knuckles on the head.
Just try to keep the paper a little lower.
Lower? Okay, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right. I remember in class at different times when a student who was reading to the class asked the nun if she'd go to the bathroom. The nun said, "No, keep on reading." And the girl started to squirm. She had to go real bad. But the nun wouldn't let her till she finally peed herself and started crying. And she got punished for peeing herself. And this not only happened to the girls, I witnessed that to the boys too, when they're reading standing up, wanting to go to the bathroom, they wouldn't let them till they peed themselves. The Shubie School also had a farm looked after by 2 Dutch brothers. They lived below the Shubie School. There were 3 houses there. One was occupied by Mr. Parker, the other 2 by the Dutch brothers. One was named Herman, I forget the other brother's name. Mr. Parker had a shop. He was our shoemaker. He used to repair the shoes for the school kids. There was another building where we did our manual training, woodworking, sheet metal. I enjoyed, and here's an example of, I still have them, that I made in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. The bookends, right here. And it's got Shubenacadie, Vaughan Nicholas, grade 7, which was, I must have been 13 years old or 14 years old, eh? And I'm surprised I still got them, but I enjoyed making, working in the manual training with Mr. Rod Brown. Anyway. And I enjoyed these classes. They were moved manual training from Shubenacadie to the reserve, from the school to the reserve in Shubenacadie. Mr. Brown, Mr. Rod Brown was our teacher. He was also our scoutmaster. I liked him and enjoyed his classes. A lot of older boys, you know, I got there in 1955, first year, but that school was opened in 1929. And the older boys always had to work at the farm, getting up early and milking the cows and stuff like that, you know, and but they wouldn't. When I was there, two farmers wouldn't clean their stalls and stuff like that. They'd wait till the weekend, and I remember myself going there to clean the mess. We had to wear high rubber boots there, you know, because so we cleaned that mess Saturday, and they had a piggery next building over. Same thing, you know. We had to go clean that, and so anyway, there was also the coal. The coal was used to feed the boiler to keep the whole building warm and stuff like that. They'd come a great big dump truck of coal, dump it near the furnace room, and us kids there had to go and shovel. You know, taking turns there shoveling our coal into the furnace room. And the other buildings had probably wood stoves because they had a pile of softwood there too. We had to pile up and everything like that, for the other buildings. You know. Anyway, later on when we got older, a farmer named Sheb needed help on his farm. He asked if he could hire the boys from the school on Saturdays to help him on the farm. The older boys would take turns working on the farm, We got $1 a day for helping him for the day. His farm was about 2 or 3 miles away. We would have to walk to his farm, take a shortcut in the woods to get there. And Chev too would not clean his stalls or pick banks for the whole week. So we really had a smelly, messy job that day. But the good thing was we were away from Shuby for the day. We got to have a real good meal because Chef's wife was a real good cook. And some of the other boys would like going there because they could smoke cigarettes. One time I was cleaning the pick pens, put my winter jacket on the railing. I had gone in for dinner and went back to work. One of the brothers came to pick us up to take us back to Shuby. And I said, just a minute, I'm going to get my jacket. I went looking for my jacket, couldn't find it at first. I looked in one of the pens, there it was. My jacket was all shattered to pieces by the pigs. Needless to say, the brother was not very happy and about my jacket, and I was not allowed to go back to Chev's for quite a while. The first 3 years was the hardest at Shuby. Our language being taken away from us, being forced to learn another language, Latin, for Mass. I was being forced to be an altar boy. And I said, I don't want to be an altar boy. Yes, you are. You're going to be one, So she took me to the chapel, and then I had the hardest time to say these Latin words. I got knocked on the head there, with a knuckle there, boom, right inside the head, and not once, but a few times because I was having trouble saying these words, So here they are, taking our language away, but forcing us to speak another language. And after that, one time in Shubenacadie, Father Monsignor Mackey passed away at the school. And they had a viewing at the school, and we had to go to the casket where we didn't want it to or not. I don't know what they were at the time, but I thought they were soldiers because they were standing in uniform, had their swords guarding the body of Monsignor Mackey. It was creepy. I guess they were Knights of Columbus, and then we had to go pray there, and you just couldn't stay there and be silent. The nuns were right beside you, making you pray. They had to hear you praying. They finally shut down the farm and made the barn into a basketball court. They tried to make us dance, teaching us the Virginia reel. I remember this nun telling me, dance like a farmer, had 2 left feet. I must have been 13 or 14 years old at the time. They had girls there, and they were all laughing at me. I felt really embarrassed. Whoops. And I did not want to take part, but again, I was forced to take part. I remember going to Halifax to see a movie. Rio Bravo was the name of it. Along with and went overnight at Mr. Roth's camp with the Boy Scouts. Also in my last year, we went on a trip with Brother Duffy. We ended up in St. Stephen's, New Brunswick. I remember Brother Duffy telling me, Vaughan, we're close to your home, and said that he might head that way, but we never did. That was in 1962. I was real happy when Freedom Day came in June. I would be leaving that school for good. After having left Shuby for good, I went to high school in Perth Andover that September. It was at this time I started experiencing discrimination from the school and the town of Perth. The Indians could not speak their language on school grounds. There were lots of fights over the years. I had trouble with my schoolwork. I started drinking and missing school. My year's average in the first year in grade 11 was just a little over 37. But I did go back and graduated in 1967 at the age of 20 years of age. At first, Mr. Webster did not want me to graduate. Although I had over 61 average in my last exam, he told me that I should come back and redo grade 12. But he had let one person graduate at a 59 average, and she was to come back as a postgraduate. I told him I want to do the same thing. He told me no. I told him that he'd already done okayed someone with a lower average than me to graduate, and that I was going to tell somebody and that what was happening and that I was being discriminated against, and this was maybe Thursday and Friday in 1 week, and then finally Monday or Tuesday he comes to me and says, okay, you can graduate with the class, Vaughan, and I went back into Southern Victoria for 3 weeks and never went back, My life after high school was a struggle with drinking and unemployment. After Christmas 1967, I got a ride down to Connecticut, USA. I stayed there with my cousin Clayton Solis, who was also a Shuby for a number of years. I got a job in the factory in 1968, Remington Arms. I met my future wife in February or March of 1968. I could not stand the heat and rotating shifts of that factory. I left the factory job. During this time, I was doing a lot of partying and drinking. I worked off and on. When I left the factory, doing roofing. I worked off and on with the people from home doing roofing. We spent more time in the bars than at work. I got engaged with my girlfriend, Bernie Rifalco. I had relatives in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Bernie and I had rough relations, mostly fighting when we were drinking. Got arrested for fighting and drinking. I really did not like the living in the city. I brought Bernie home for the weekend, Labor Day weekend in 1968. All we did was drink, party all weekend. We went back to Bridgeport in October. I told Bernie I was going back home. I could not stand life in the city. She said, "What about us? We're engaged." And she was a lot better off than I was. She had a steady job, 66 Mustang. You know, I said, I'm going back home. If you want to come with me and live in Canada, you know, I told her to really think about it and let me know. It was a few days later she let me know that she was coming to Canada with me. And it took a week or two for her to get her things in order. We got married on December 7th, 1968. December 7th is when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. That's how our marriage was like, a war for the first 7 years with my drinking. I was an abusive husband, orally and physically. I used to beat her when I was drunk during my drinking days. I used to do drugs also. Our first child was born September 21st, 1969, Vaughan Jr. We were broke when we got married, and I had odd jobs, so did she. We barely got by. I went to trade school in 69, took electrical construction trade at school. After trade school, I joined the union, IBW Local 126, and I was apprenticed there for a couple of years. Our second child, Corey Nicholas, was born April 7, 1972. Our marriage was still a stormy one with my drinking and the boys getting older. I started getting abusive verbally and with spanking. I got my electrical license in September 1974. I was working for a local contractor earning $2.50 an hour in 1972. When I left him in December 1975, I was earning $5 an hour. My wife Bernie was quite upset. And October 17, 2011, I went on unemployment. Life was quite difficult for me and the family. Everybody told me I was a nice guy, but at home I was totally a different person. I was strict, stern, and I was yelling at my wife and my kids. I finally got back to work with the union, Local 2166. After many ultimatums, my wife told me if I didn't stop drinking, she was going to leave me, and her and the boys were going back to States, you know, and then I knew she meant business this time. Although we had a few separations of our marriage, I did not want to lose her and the boys. I quit drinking cold turkey in July 1975. And I guess it was 36 years sober when I wrote this, you know. And that was 36 years ago. But this year, in December 7, would be 53 years for my wife and I being married. I quit drinking, and I was still a miserable person at home, you know. At least I was not beating on her. I was still being hard on my boys when I thought they did something wrong. In December 9, 1978, our daughter, Vaughan Nicholas, was born. We call her Bonnie after my mom. That was her nickname. I'm almost done here, so life was pretty decent for a number of years. My boys were in high school, and they started experimenting in cigarettes and alcohol. I told them I did not want them to do these things at home. I didn't want to see them coming home drinking. If they did, I'd kick them out. For the most part, they didn't, except one night Corey came home, not drunk, but I knew he had been drinking. We started arguing. He came at me and I hit him, and we were both yelling at each other. I told him to go downstairs and go to bed. He went down angry and yelling. After that, we had a rough relationship as a father and son. In January 6, 1990, my wife and I had woken up at 5 a.m. by the RCMP and the Tobique police. I answered the door and they asked for my son Corey, if Corey was home. I said, no, he must be out with his friends. That's when they told us he had stolen a car. We said we didn't know anything about it. They left. My wife and I started worrying about Corey. We didn't go back to sleep, and so we stayed up. A little after 8 a.m., Corey came in the door. I told him the RCMP and Tobique police were here looking for him. Did you steal that car? He said no. And he asked if Vaughan Jr. was home. I said, yes, he's sleeping downstairs. He went downstairs. A few minutes later, I heard a gun being cocked. Then a second later, I heard the shot. I ran downstairs, seen Corey in a pool of blood. I hollered, why, Corey, why? I heard my wife, Bernie, come downstairs. I yelled to her, don't come down here. I did not want her to see our son like that. We called the RCMP and Tobique police. When they got here, I told them, you want my son? He's downstairs. I brought them downstairs, and there he is, 17 years old. Took his whole life. I often ask, was I that bad of a parent? Life has never been the same for me. I will live with this for the rest of my life. It's not been easy. As my daughter was growing up, she was in high school. She too was experimenting in alcohol. I heard noise in her room. I told her to open the room, and she would not open the room. So I broke it down as her friends were jumping out the window. She was yelling and swearing at me, and I hit one of the kids and trying to get out the window. Needless to say, we were going to be charged for physical assault on my daughter. In the end, I did not get charged, and my daughter came back home. I told her I would never hit her again. I don't know why I was so mean to my kids. I don't think twice about hitting them with the hardwood yardstick when I thought they were being bad in their younger years. Before I went to Shubenacadie, I do not remember any bad spankings from my mom or my dad. I remember the beatings I got at Shubenacadie and for speaking my language and seeing other kids getting beat. I believe I learned this behavior by the nuns to try and make us kids obey. A few years after my son Corey committed suicide, my other son tried, but it was unsuccessful. He cut his wrist, bled from 4 a.m. till he drove in my yard, supper time, beeping the horn. I went out. He said, I'm sorry. Vaughan said, I'm sorry. He showed me his wrist, and my wife was on the porch. I told her, call the emergency at the hospital in Perth, that I was bringing my son down. When we saw the doctor, he looked at my son and said, somebody's looking after you because you really should be dead. And thank you, God, for not taking my son. Here's what I thought at the time. It was a couple of years later when a program called Healing Begins started for residential school survivors. My sister Iris, my brother Wayne, his wife Kathy, and daughter Leanne worked at this program. I was still working away on construction and did not participate. Our cousin Wendell Purley also went to Shubie and took part in the program. It was at this period when we started talking about Shubie and what was done to us Indian children by the government and the church. Other programs came into play and involved LTG counseling from Manchester, New Hampshire. LTG stands for Lang, Torch, and Giannakis, their names. Robert Lang, Michael Torch, and John Jack Giannakis. They started working with our survivors at the old rehab by the St. John River. They came on a monthly basis teaching a system to our survivors. I happened to join them one weekend. I got to meet LNG for the first time. That was in the late 90s. The others had been working with LTG for a few years. It was then I felt I was not affected by attending Shubie. When I started telling my experiences, I was traumatized by my stay at Shubie for 6 years. I started attending these monthly meetings every month, had every different theme on healing, how to deal with stress, etc. A lot of different topics over the years. Here it is, 2011. I know without the help of the local wellness center, its workers, along with the LTG, and getting to see and meeting other survivors on the yearly gatherings for Indian residential school survivors, I would still be at this place where I was angry, a mean person. I was a few years before. Today I am no longer that person. Today I am happy. I love my wife and my kids. I'm stressed because I am not working right now. Hopefully things will change in the near future. I'm able to cope with issues, also with people. We have weekly meetings at our Tobique, with our Tobique survivors. Every Wednesday night, we met at my sister Iris's. At that meeting, we gave each other comfort. We talk about everything and anything. We are there to listen and make sure everyone is okay. These meetings are held at my sister's Iris, sometimes at Wayne's, and sometimes at my place if somebody has to be away. Pretty soon we will be telling our stories at the TRC in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Our stories about what happened to us Indian children in the school Shubie. We all have something in common. We were Indian. We suffered at the abuse that the government and the church inflicted upon us. Some were sexually abused, some severely physically beaten and mistreated. We were all psychologically affected. And for those who attended Shubie, we are brothers, sisters. When one hurts, we all hurt. We are survivors. For Canada and the church, I cannot understand why you did this to us, little innocent Indian children. We were treated like criminals. We did nothing wrong, but only spoke our language. I believe Canada had a motive to destroy our language. and their culture with the church's help in implementing the government policies. This act between the government and church was an act of genocide to do away with Indians and assimilate them into the white society, and they're still trying to do that today. I have a different view of the church today, don't get me wrong. I believe there is a higher power. There is the Great Spirit. I still go to church, funerals, weddings, etc. I still take communion when I go. The church today is still doing the same thing they did yesterday in the earlier days. Their priests are still molesting kids around the world. Back in the day, when they found a priest or nun or brother molesting kids, they would send them away to another school, another parish, or eventually rehab. These people would go unpunished for ruining a childhood, sometimes scarring them for life. Therefore, I have told the truth about my feelings, and in good conscience. I cannot reconcile with the government of Canada or the Church, Catholic Church. You cannot reconcile genocide. Thank you, Vaughan Nicholas, Tobique First Nation. That was what I wrote in 2011, but a lot has happened, since then, and, I should be adding a lot more. But the government and church almost got away with it. Had it not been for the 2015 they found in Kamloops earlier this last year, Now, there were stories from survivors that saying these things did happen, but the government and the church wouldn't listen to us, But they did find those 15 bodies, and they're finding more young kids across Canada, different schools, You know what I mean? They almost got away with it, Perhaps, I'm 74 years old, and the schools closed in 67, 75 maybe for across Canada, even maybe later. But there's not too many more survivors, left, because all the schools are closed now, But the thing is, those little kids are our heroes now, Everybody knows what the church and the government did to us. The whole world knows, you know what I mean? They can't hide it. And what they did to us was actually criminal. They kidnapped these kids from their homes, from their communities, and then they spared no expense to go wherever, way the hell out in the woods to get these kids. And when one of the kids, got killed or died from disease, they didn't have the decency to take these kids. Back to their mothers, their community. And they call us savages. Who's a savage that would do that to these little kids? I find it awful hard with the government. We hear all these good words over the years, that there's Harper said there's going to be a new beginning for us, when he said his apology in 2006 or 8. Yet, a lot of us, if there's going to be a new beginning, they accepted the apology. But there was no action, He didn't do nothing. He said they had nice things and stuff like that. They had a nice ceremony in Ottawa and stuff like that, Our people are still hurting today. Look at what they're doing to our fishermen. Governments is doing that. Look what they're doing to our elders out west, you know, protecting their land and protecting their resources, stuff like that, eh? You know, and then look what they did in Elsie. You know, you had these guns, you know, against girls kneeling down with feathers. You know, our elders being injured. And they want reconciliation. You know, Canada will never be a great country unless it comes to terms with Indigenous people across this land to be inclusive, stuff like that. Right now we're not. Their actions say they're not, you know. And hopefully, you know, our kids get educated, you know, and be welcomed into society. You know, myself, you know, I worked 40 years in construction away from the reserve. And the people I've met are my friends. You know, we can coexist as a native and non-native. You know, I know it can be done. But the government has to be there to enforce our rights. They're not honoring our treaties. They're not obeying their own laws. You know what I mean? Supreme Court of Canada says we can fish, you know, we can hunt, you know, stuff like that. Yet we have DFO saying no. They're not even, Canada's not even obeying its own laws, you know. And I just feel that, you know, things are happening today, and I think it's kids that are coming up will be more educated and be able to tell Canada, you know, to do the right thing. Accept us who we are. You know, we're Indian people all across this land, you know. And I have some pictures here to show, you know. This is my friend Thomas Morrison from Listagouche, Quebec, eh? And we've been friends. We kept our friendship after we left school, stuff like that. And Tom passed away here a couple of years ago, my friend. Yeah, Thomas Morrison. And this is at the TCR event, eh? Where Justice Sinclair was there, and my brother Wayne passed on 2015. My Iris passed on 2000, it'll be 2 years this fall. And we used to all go together. We go to talks, you know, here in UNB. It was always three of us, you know, but and then there's poems here, right? You know, like, oh, here, so I want to show you this. Here's the Shubenacadie School, right here. That's no longer there. That's what's here. This is a plastic plant that's there now, eh? And where this was. And I'll turn this around. That's one of the pictures of the schools. And this is Father Collins. I knew him as Father Collins, eh? But I show my pictures in gatherings, and then I witnessed one woman there walking by the table. I had a table there, and then she just froze. And then she said, "The fucking devil himself," you know. And then she just froze and walked away, you know. And like I said, you know, I knew him as a priest. And this is a picture of my sister getting her communion. She's at the end there, eh? Sister Gilberta sent this picture to my mother when she was in the sanatorium. And then wrote to her, you know, saying that, well, the picture of her individually didn't show up, you know, but she's the last one here, and then you could get a negative of her, and if she wanted to. Yeah, and this is, what a pretty picture this is. Looks so nice and peaceful. You know what I mean? You got the Shubenacadie River, you got the three houses there, and the school up here. But what went on in that school was not peaceful, you know, for the kids. It was a concentration camp, I would say. Incarceration for sure. We had to do everything, you know, go march and you understand. If you got out of line, you got that. And here's a picture of the Boy Scouts right here. Mr. Rod Brown right here, you know, and then my brother Wayne's here, and this is me here, and I know a couple other boys. Some of the other boys I forgot their names. There's a Harold Morrison here somewhere. It's Tommy's brother, my buddy. He's right here. So that was some of the activities that we enjoyed, you know. Yeah. And they told us we were only there 3 years, you know. And but here's the picture. The building was gray at the time in 1955. I don't know where my brother Wayne is, but I'm here, and this is my sister Iris, and this is brother Lawler, or Lawler, I think he was named. Yeah, not brother, Father Lawler. Yeah. Father Collins came later date. Yeah, and a bunch of kids, of course. When we had to gather like this and have pictures taken, we had to smile. They made us smile. I think I smiled because I think I got a little treat or something like that. I'm holding a box, or maybe a box of chocolates. I don't remember, but anyway, you know, these are there. You know, I tell you, and this is the manual training on the other side of the school here, and Mr. Parker's shop is right here, shoemaker shop, eh? So that's and this what's in front here is a ball field we used to play on, eh? And this is what I showed you this. I made at the manual training, and I didn't realize it, but just recently I said, hey, that's shape sort of reminds you of religious thing, eh? And it's got Shubenacadie Indian Residential School, grade 7. Yeah, so that must have been about 60, 61. Yeah. And I think that that gives you the a little bit of proof, you know, that my story reflects what I told, eh? You know, I went back in 1975 with my wife. We went to a Indian Summer Games in Indian Brook, eh? Shubenacadie Reserve. And then, while things were a little lull and stuff like that, I said, I want to go show you where I went to school, eh? Which is only maybe 10, 15-minute drive from the reserve. I took her there and then took some of these pictures there, eh? You know, and just to, and it didn't, I didn't get triggered when I was there in 75, because when I left the school in 62, boom, it's a blackout, you know. You don't think about it and stuff like that. It wasn't until, yeah, there's a picture of my sister Iris again. Yeah, right here. And this is Sister Gilberta, the one that wrote the letter to my mother in sanatorium, you know. And this is my brother Wayne and his wife Kathy. She too was a survivor. She's a Cree from Quebec, and she went to 2 schools, one in Quebec and one in Ontario. You know, so they're both gone, Wayne and Kathy. Yes, I'd like to read a poem that my brother wrote, and it's called Warrior. The tears of my youth had stopped flowing from absorbing the injustice inflicted by godly persons and cruel and wicked devils who have extracted me from the womb of my community, cutting off my mother tongue, forcible compliance to their way of life, and killing my spirit, my people, my community, and my nation. Severely depressed, I painfully walk with permanent scars that are deeply saturated within my soul. I can no longer speak from my heart as I continue my life's journey, looking, hoping, and searching for the end of the trail, beaten, broken, burdened, and buried in despair. Helpless and unable to cope with the weight of the atrocities gushing from the subtle but deadly waves of genocide that will not subside from all levels of governments, along with the courts and the dominion that are manipulating, diminishing, and imposing changes that disrupts the well-being of our communities. My physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual being are extremely out of balance, where healing can only come from within. I must rise above the injuries of yesterday. Otherwise, I will be the vessel of tomorrow's generations that may lead into the fatality of a people. I am a warrior gravely wounded from the incarceration of the Indian Residential School and genocide. But it is time that my resilience will abrogate the usurping of my people's rights, liberties, and freedoms upon the lands and resources we own, enjoy, use, and occupy. I must heal myself by picking up the multiple years of baggage and heal every single wound that has pierced my body and soul, so that I cannot live without shame, poverty, abuse, and anger. Then, and only then, will the healing drums give strength, pride, and dignity among the hearts and minds of all warriors. Canada Day poem by Vaughan Nicholas, July 1st, 2010. I just want to let everybody know thank everybody for listening to my story and stuff like that. I'm just one, and I was one of the lucky ones. You know, there's others that had a lot more severe abuse, sexual abuse, and stuff like that. You know, in that Shubenacadie school. You know, and this is what the government has done to our people. You know, and hopefully, you know, to reconcile, you know, it has to start, you know, recognizing our treaties and recognizing and obeying the laws the Supreme Court of Canada has given to our people across this country. You know, and to be included. I was not born a Canadian citizen. You know, it was not until 1958 when Indians became citizens, you know. But yet, things that are happening now across our lands, Indian country, across Canada, you know, we have to be included in our resources and stuff like that, you know, in order to be accepted into the white society of Canada, Anglophone, Francophone, and the indigenous people across this land. Corporations have more rights than us indigenous people in this land, you know. And what's happened with the policing, you know, they were part of putting us in residential schools, and the killing of our people, even to this day, just not too long ago, you know, it's got to stop, you know. And we want to, myself, you know, I want to be inclusion in Canada, you know. Reconciliation, you won't see it in my lifetime, you know. I don't know how many more years left. Not very long, and most of the survivors are the same age. We're going to be gone in pretty while, but you, the people of Canada, can make sure that you know, healing amongst our peoples and your peoples will make a better life for everyone. Thank you very much.